Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to Rabbit Savior, Jonathan Silva, back on, and a very special guest. Jonathan, good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. Doing great. If you don't mind, I know I ask you this all the time, a little bit about yourself and Rabbit Savior.
Yeah, I am the founder of Rabbit Savior. We started this last year, and we are a Rabbit platform that houses different services like fund bill assistance. We got donation platforms, education, things like that. So we are just kind of spinning off in a direction to where people can just go to our website and have a complete hub and all the information they need. And then Doug is actually a part of the team, and he is the bunny chat in Canada right now.
Say it again. Doug. Yeah. What you said.
Yeah, Doug's actually part of the bunny chat
team. Yeah, right. Yeah. Very knowledgeable. I found that out. Of course, you wouldn't bring him on if he wasn't. But just in the few minutes we spoke off air, Doug, I'm just blown away by
very good information.
So tell us a little bit more about yourself, Doug.
I've been a rabbit owner for over 35, going on 40 years.
Wow, that's great.
And starting back in, I'm talking when I was around 9 or 10 years old, I had a couple of bad experiences, not knowing any better. This was pre-internet. I mean, this is in a time when if you wanted to learn something, you had to go to the public library.
That's right.
Okay? Yeah. And use microfilms and look up encyclopedias and so on and so forth. And I did all that. I had my first rabbit had an incident with GI stasis. Made a couple of mistakes based on information that was provided to me by the pet store that I purchased the rabbit from. I remember the guy very well. A nice enough young guy said, buy this, do this, do that, feed this, feed that. Well, it ended up I found out the hard way a few months into owning that rabbit that the information wasn't really ideal for a rabbit's diet. So I had to make dramatic changes. And the information that I was given at this particular pet store, which is a notable large chain of pet stores in Canada, I won't name, turned out to be the veterinarian was literally stunned and shocked by the misinformation I'd been provided. And the information was bad, and it literally caused my rabbit to go into stasis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and at the time, living with a single mom on a tight budget and everything, I believe it was $500 or $600 vet bill, and we're talking, early 1990s. Okay, It was a lot of money.
A lot of money back then.
Yeah, a lot. And at that point, I said to myself, you know what? I can't let this happen again. What am I going to do? So, of course, I visited a couple of local public libraries. Very, very difficult to find information. I found out what I could with, old school Encyclopedia Britannica. Luckily enough, I got tuned on to through a friend at that particular library, because I'd been there so many times over this few weeks following this incident. Was turned on to the fact that she actually had a sister-in-law that was a veterinarian technician. Ended up getting on the phone with her. She gave me a couple of really good ideas, a couple of addresses, explained like the Ontario Veterinarian College and other colleges and so on. So I started writing letters, old school, handwritten, stamped. What do I do? What do you recommend? I've been told this. Now I've been told that by the vet. I want to trust the vet, but I just want a second opinion. What do you recommend? What do you not recommend I feed this rabbit? And of course, all the information lined up. So I learned from that. But then it kind of became, well, you know what? I want to know more. I want to understand how the GI tract works. I want to understand the hind gut. I want to understand the microbial bacterial process of the digestion of the fibers and the cecum and everything else. So I pursued that. And, at that young age, you take in this type of information very easily and you learn it. And I just kept growing on it. And of course, once the internet came out, I just expanded and read and got into reading veterinarian internal medicine journals, taking multiple sources of recommended diet, kind of funneling through the good ones, the bad ones, the contradictory ones, and basically came up with, 90% of what I've read says do this, so let's try it and make it happen. And it worked. Going forward after that, many years ahead, just a few years ago, because of my interest in the whole bunny organizations and everything, I started up a volunteer organization called Bun Runners. And what I was doing and what we were doing is basically offering free services to veterinarians, veterinarian colleges, multiple rescues. And we were picking up and delivering and picking up and bringing back rabbits for various health conditions, desexing operations. And also I had a whole mix of individual private people that did not have a vehicle or a means of transportation to get their rabbit from their home to veterinarian clinics. And the vast majority of them, unfortunately, were GI stasis incidents. So I took that opportunity after doing dozens of them, like literally dozens of them. I took that opportunity to kind of feel and pick through, and I kind of made some observations when I would go and pick up these rabbits from private households, from normal individuals, single rabbit owners. Some were bonded rabbit owners. So I would just kind of, you'd need to spend the 5 or 10 minutes sitting with the rabbit next to the cage before I put him inside the carrier, to put him in my truck to do the transportation and so on, to familiarize the rabbit with me. And I would just kind of glance around without saying anything, but just looking around, and I would pick up on things. And I would, upon returning the rabbit, I would have quite often, not every time, but let's say 25% of the time, I would say, by the way, now the rabbit's back, everything's good. I would recommend that you remove, example given, that honey stick with seeds hanging on your cage. I'm looking at your pellets, and I see that you're using a muesli pellet that has dehydrated fruits in it, and a various number of seeds. And then I'd flip over the bag. This is just one incident. It did this many times. And I point out this, that, this isn't good. This isn't good. Have you noticed that the rabbit's only picking through the colorful kibble and eating the dehydrated pineapple and stuff? Well, yeah, I waste a lot of food because you're not actually eating the physical pellets. Okay. And, and then of course I would, casually, and a lot of times this was over a coffee. I just provided a service for free. I still don't accept donations for fuel or anything. And so quite often I'd get offered a coffee or a tea. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was one instance I drove 600 kilometers round trip doing one rabbit delivery. Okay. So absolutely. I mean, I'm beat. I got to get out of my truck. I'm coming in for a coffee. And then I would say, oh, by the way, I noticed this and I noticed that. Can I ask you what vegetables you're feeding? And quite often everything was fine. But I would say 1 in 4 times it just opened up Pandora's box. And I would then explain and then break down how the cecum works and the effects of sugar in the cecum, and how, the bacteria flourishes and the interruptions, and, explain what causes GI stasis and so on and so forth, and how to avoid it going forward. And luckily, I would say 9 out of 10 of these incidents where I took the time and I explained all this, never did see those rabbits again. And we're going back, in some cases upwards of 2 years ago. And I do keep in contact with some of these people. There were also like forever homes that I delivered and picked up and dropped off foster bunnies. And so I kind of kept in touch with these people going forward to see if any recurring problems happened with stasis. There was maybe a couple that did, but stasis can kind of happen on its own from basically things that the rabbit owner can't control. It's just kind of one of those things. The perfect storm occurs. And next thing you know, you have a slowdown in the GI tract, and it's not caught on time because the people didn't notice that the excretions got smaller, darker, harder, were like a pearl necklace with hair in them. So it just wasn't caught in time to prevent a full-blown impact in the GI tract, basically a complete stop, okay, which can be fatal in as little as 24 hours, okay? So I kind of took all of those learnings, educations, on-hand experience, a lot of follow-up, keeping in contact with these people. So I've been able to kind of come up with a basic formula, not so much a formula, but kind of a to-do and a not-to-do, and it's okay to do list, but not every day when it comes to dietary requirements and needs and treats and sugars and carbs and starches and so on and so forth. So it's kind of like just a huge conglomeration of my personal experiences, my personal teachings and learnings over the last going on 40 years, and hands-on experience based on doing this bun running back and forth between veterinarian clinics and colleges and so on.
I wanted to ask you, Doug Elkins, why a rabbit initially? Why that first rabbit?
It was gifted to me. We were living, after my parents' divorce, I was young. I was about 9 or 10 years old. We weren't allowed to have cats or dogs. And, typical kid, I wanted something, right? Yeah. Started with a hamster, had a hamster, when I was very young. I had a couple of guinea pigs and so on. And then it was actually a birthday gift from my mother and my brother. And they hooked me up with my first rabbit. And it just kind of went from there. So, there was a couple of periods in between the passing of previous rabbits So all said and told, I basically have owned rabbits for over 35 years cumulatively, right?
That's amazing.
That is, and how you wanted to learn more and more, and share that.
Well,
again. One of the things, forgive me, one of the things that people would always say, and it was certainly well intended. People that knew that we had rabbits would want to give us carrots from their garden, and everybody thinks, because of Bugs Bunny or whatever, that, and of course they do like that, but I would say, just give me the tops. If you're not using the tops, keep the carrots and give me the tops, the greens from them. But that's one of the things that a mistake that probably, again, not that people aren't well intended, but think that that's okay, and the high sugar. Do you want to talk about that, about carrots at all, Doug?
Yeah. So, and actually, oddly enough, this was exactly one of the mistakes and one of the recommendations made to me on the ownership of this first rabbit that I'm discussing. Okay. And it was absolutely, and I felt the same way. I watched Looney Tunes growing up. So of course, carrots and realistically, if a rabbit ate nothing but carrots every day like Bugs did, I'd be amazed if it lived past 18 months of age. Like, honestly, it's that serious of an impact on them. She'd die every day if that was the exclusive food, like what Bugs did. Okay. So that was one of the key mistakes. So basically, what carrots on a daily basis, and again, a small amount on a daily basis, you can get away with. However, I kind of lean on the side of caution, and I kind of prefer to say to people, it's kind of like a once or twice a week thing. And everything has to be put into scale. So when someone says, well, how much carrot? Well, my first question is, how much does your rabbit weigh? If you have a 20-pound giant and I tell you, 2 baby carrots is fine twice a week, and then you pass that information on to somebody, oh, but this guy or my vet said 2 baby carrots twice a week is fine, and now somebody with a 2.5-pound dwarf lion head follows that advice, you're asking for trouble, right? So basically what happens is, similar to a human's digestive tract, you have the food enters through the mouth, meets the saliva glands, goes down the esophagus, and enters the stomach, like in a human stomach. Up until there, everything's pretty much the same. That's where it kind of gets the first stage of 5 or 6 stages of the actual digestive process, which is really complex. So I kind of have to explain this to explain why carrots and starches and everything mess things up. It's kind of critical in understanding this. Once it leaves that stomach, it goes through the intestine and it enters the cecum. And this is actually the key thing. The cecum is a fermentation chamber. It's also known as an enhanced nutrient retriever. Okay, so that's where your hay, your carrot, your treats, everything, your water. Basically, it's kind of like besides a fermentation chamber, it basically is how the energy is created for your rabbit to hop, bodily energy. Okay, so in there you have a very sophisticated and delicate balance of a couple of bacterias, protozoa, and fungal yeast. These 3 compounds inside the cecum, which is also known as the hind gut. So now we're in the second stomach. Let's call it a stomach for lack of a better description, okay? When this fermentation chamber ferments your hay, your heavy grasses, your foods, what happens is the walls of the cecum then utilize that fermentation to absorb your volatile fatty acids, which are your energy, okay? Your amino acids, vitamins, nutrients, and minerals, but it can't do it 100% perfect. So now we move on to the next step, which is where it gets really complicated and kind of strange and almost hard to believe, and it's called the backwash system. So what happens after this fermentation, the addition of water into the cecum, the fermentation happens, all of the pre-mentioned things are absorbed through the wall. There's still a lot of unabsorbed and unutilized nutrients and so on. So when it leaves the cecum, it's now making its way, basically it's going to the next stage to convert to poo balls, okay? So you have a ribbed, you can call it the rectum tube, you can call it the large intestine. It's kind of ribbed like a rippled potato chip on the inside of this, the inside diameter. And the reason for the ribs is, as the now secondary processed fibers and so on and so forth leave the cecum and making their way to become poo balls, for lack of a better description, they are going through the second last stage, let me correct myself, of the absorption. And what happens here is post-cecum on its way to poo balls is when this rippled chip area actually absorbs more volatile fatty acids, some of the waters and the electrolytes and a little bit of nutrients, but it still hasn't processed them all. And this is where it gets weird. The backwash system, and the reason why the rippled effect is, you actually have small amounts of fiber covered with mucus mixed with bacteria and so on. I won't get into all the complicated parts of it. They actually go in the opposite direction. And this is the only time that a rabbit's GI tract flows backwards. Rabbits can't even vomit. So imagine now you've left the cecum, you're halfway to the exit door, okay, becoming a poo ball, but you now realize that there's still 20, or let's just throw a number, 20% of valuable nutrients, fibers, and electrolytes and so on. So what happens? It goes back in the cecum. It actually backtracks. Once it re-enters the cecum, the whole fermentation process changes. What happens in this fermentation process is water is now actually extracted from the cecum. It had previously had been added to help with the fermentation process. And now you're creating your cecotrophs, okay? So now it's tightened up, compressed, covered with mucus, and you have these blackberry, for lack of a better description, shaped fecal matter, okay? Now that exits. Okay, so you think it's over. It's still not over. Now that material is actually eaten by your rabbit, okay? Sometimes, quite often, you don't even see it happening because they basically do it right from the butt. And now it has its last chance to re-enter from the mouth, and it goes through the whole tubes, first, second, back out. It's very complex. And so now that you understand that, here's what happens when you add carrot. Let's use carrot. And carrot, don't misunderstand me. Carrot is not a no, okay? It is
in moderation, though, right?
In moderation, realistically, small amounts. And again, everything has to be put to scale. So whenever somebody says, use this, feed this much, give, a half an inch of banana once a week or whatever. Well, how big's your rabbit? Okay.
That's what you got to base it off the size of the rabbit and the weight, right?
Yeah. So like I tend to use like the 5 pound rule because that's kind of in my own personal rabbit right now is 3 pounds. Okay. But let's say 5 pounds is the norm. So if somebody says how many pellets, you could say, you can also do it by a pound or a kilogram scale, like, 10 grams of pellets per pound or whatever the case may be. Right. But at the end of the day, you really have to realize that these sugars now that were not absorbed in the first gut and through the intestinal tract, now these sugars, which turn into carbohydrates, also starches and yeast, what happens is when they enter the cecum in excessive amounts, the cecum becomes overwhelmed because the bacteria that I previously mentioned that consume and start this fermentation process, they thrive on those sugars, carbs, and starches, and they explode in numbers. So what happens when these bacteria and so on and these fermentation chemicals and so on basically explode in numbers is you get an acceleration in this whole process. It goes too fast, okay? And it also creates fermented gas at a very large rate. So now you have, a bulk amount of, let's say, sugar from a banana or a carrot. It has made it through the entire previously mentioned pathway. Now the unabsorbed part is in the cecum. Now, instead of having as a number 1 million bacteria, now you have 2 million. So the fermentation process is too fast. You end up with bloat, gas, and of course one
problem.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the causes. I'm trying to keep it very simple. There's many more complexities and stuff, but I don't want to get too elaborate. But this is the simple description. So now you have this accelerated fermentation. You have an expansion in the cecum. Your rabbit tells itself, I'm full. It stops eating, drinking. What's the problem with that? Well, a rabbit's digestive system works like this. In with the new, out with the old.
Yeah.
It's pushing itself through the system. Okay. So, and a rabbit can eat up to 30 times a day, not a full meal, but they'll nibble, they'll munch to process and push 30 times a day. Okay.
Wow.
It might be 2 or 3 mouthfuls of hay, 25 of those times. Okay. But at the end of the day, it's to keep the momentum going. As soon as you cause, a break in that momentum based on the fact the rabbit thinks its cecum is full because of the expansion, the pressure, the gas, and so on and so forth. And that can be caused by blockages, wool blocks, everything else can, but let's just keep it at with the sugars and the starches and so on. And that's when you start with the first cecal hypomotility, which is the slowing of the entire digestive tract. And eventually, if you get an all-out stop of your rabbit ingesting and drinking water, that's when the cecal impaction, hardening of that, the gas expansion, and everything happened in cecum. And then basically you're in an emergency situation. You're pretty much in an emergency situation at that point.
Doug Elkins, tell us the ideal diet for a rabbit.
Ideal diet, and
that's going to vary because of size and weight and everything, right?
Well, not if we don't even talk about like volumes per pound and everything. The ideal diet is very, very high fiber, okay? Because the fermentation chamber that I just described is basically in a rabbit and a few other herbivores just to process and get the VFAs and the amino acids and everything out of hay, straw, fiber, okay? Like your Timothy hay, whatever it might be. So you're going to need, like, realistically, and different breeds, this kind of changes too. There's a slightly different formula for woolies like Angoras and lion heads and so on and so forth. But basically, you're going to be aiming for around an 80% of the total ingested diet of a high fiber hay, Timothy hay, for example. And then you're going to want to use a small amount of pellets, like minimal. We're talking, let's call it 5%, 10%, absolute maximum. This is based on an adult rabbit, by the way, not a junior rabbit, like a young baby rabbit, for example. And then you're going to want a certain amount, depending again on the size of the rabbit, of fresh vegetables. And when I say that, I mean staple fresh vegetables that are reasonably safe, basically completely safe for daily consumption, as long as you keep them in a rotation.
Such
example
as?
Given,
go ahead.
I rotate between romaine lettuce, green leaf lettuce. Like this week, for example, because the green leaf didn't look so great, I only got one head, and I have, a couple of heads of romaine or whatever. So this week I'll feed romaine lettuce primarily with just a small piece of green leaf 4 or 5 days. And then on the other 2 or 3 days, 2.5 days, whatever the case may be, I will still put a small piece of romaine, because you want to keep these balances kind of, you don't want to you don't want to just throw a different veg after 4 or 5 days of your rabbit eating strictly romaine. That's why I kind of have like 90% romaine, 10% green leaf. And then I kind of switch it over the other couple of days. I mean, there's other lettuces that are safe too. That you can do, but it's kind of rotation is kind of key. You don't want the cecum and the GI tract to process the exact same, let's say, romaine lettuce every single day for 10 years. 10 years. Okay. Yeah. It creates too much equality, and it doesn't allow for adjustments. So now all of a sudden you go to the store, there's no romaine lettuce. Oh, okay, I'm going to buy green leaf. I don't have any romaine at home to do a transition. And you start throwing green leaf or red leaf lettuce at your rabbit, twice a day. And then you could run into problems where the GI tract and the cecum can't adjust to it quickly. And you could get small symptoms like diarrhea and so on and so forth, or bloating or whatever. Not necessarily cause GI stasis, but it could cause some small problems because you haven't done a sort of transition from one green to another, right? So that's kind of the staples that I use. And then I will also, a couple of days a week, like say every second or third day, I'll get into a little bit of dried dandelion, fresh dandelion greens, little bit of curly parsley, and I'll rotate. It won't be the same every week. Next week I might not get curly parsley. I might get dandelion greens at the store. So that'll be kind of a couple of days the following week. So it's a rotation. Rotation and variety is very important to kind of prevent GI stasis. And if you don't do that, that's how I suspect, and from what I've seen, that's kind of one of the contributors for innocent, not the bunny owner's fault GI stasis. Yeah. Okay, I've been feeding romaine lettuce every day, hypothetically, for 18 months. My rabbit was great, was fine. Why did it get GI stasis? It didn't swallow any foreign matter, no plastic, no carpet fiber. What happened? Well, there was no variety. There was no, so the entire GI tract, and this doesn't happen often, but it can happen. The entire GI tract is set on one goal and one goal only, and it becomes accustomed to that. And then the flora kind of doesn't have enough alterations to keep it in check. It needs a little bit of, change to keep everything perfectly. A wild rabbit, for example, wouldn't eat the same thing every day for years on end. It would eat different grasses, different hays, different shrubs, whatever the case may be, right?
Very complex. Yeah, so my question is, what do you think about these Facebook groups that give advice that I guess their own opinion might work on their rabbit, but doesn't work on another rabbit? And have you seen a dramatic change when people, oh, let me try this. I'm in this Facebook group, so I trust this Facebook group, and they don't trust a vet, or any nightmare things you've seen on, the comments or threads. I feed my rabbit this, and he's fine, and 6 months down the road, he passes away. What's like the nightmare things you've seen on Facebook that you wish you can correct, but obviously you can't?
I would probably have to say brassica group vegetables. Okay, brassica group vegetables are high in sulfurous. So a brassica group vegetable would be, for example, cabbage, kale, broccoli. And again, you can feed these, but you can't do it every day. And these people that have catastrophic situations are the people that, as a daily staple, are using things like cabbage, broccoli, or not even as a staple. Let's say 50% or more of the diet. Any amount basically isn't good every day of certain vegetables, but particularly the cabbage, or you'd have to Google it. Brassica group. There's so many in that group. Yeah. Okay, and that's why when you cook cabbage, you get that distinct sulfury smell. Okay, so the sulfurous compounds in these brassica group vegetables, no different than a person. Cabbage causes gas. Yes. Okay. Yeah. And in a rabbit, because you have the fermentation chamber, it's much more enhanced. Yeah. It's much. And the downside is when a human gets gas, you take an antacid, some Pepto, whatever. A rabbit will hide these symptoms until they're literally needing a veterinarian. Yeah. So this advice that people are getting on Facebook, and this is usually how it goes. And believe me, let's say 90, even if I said 99% of the advice is good advice, and it's not the administrators of the Facebook groups, it's not certainly not the vast majority of the members of these rabbit Facebook groups. What it is basically people that it works for my rabbit, so try this. It should be fine with yours. I've been feeding my rabbit, 3 baby carrots every day for 5 years, and it's alive and healthy and fantastic. Well, yeah, but you also have a 20-pound rabbit, and you just gave this advice to a person with a 3-pound rabbit. Yeah. Okay, so that's the key. That's one of the main things. And again, I believe this person, and I completely understand their statement when they say, "I've been doing this for 5 years, and my rabbit is healthy." I get it. I completely understand that. Okay, you're doing it. You're getting away with it, but the next rabbit. Odds are fairly good. It may not. Okay. And what will happen over the long term, cumulatively? That rabbit that's 5 years old now, will its lifespan be 7 years, 8 years, 9 years? Will it suddenly get a fatal case of GI stasis and this person lives a 3-hour drive from an exotic veterinarian and it doesn't make it there? Okay.
It's crazy. So yesterday, I think I was on Instagram or Facebook. Yeah, Instagram. Little baby rabbit. Lady was feeding like half a banana to it. I'm just like, oh my God, what are you doing? Like nothing. I'm just like, wow. And you can't comment because you don't want to be those trolls.
I know.
But it's 50-50 situation. What do you do?
Yeah. And you know what? If you were to know that was a once a week incident and they had given that to the rabbit, right after it had ingested, a leaf and a half of romaine and a handful and a half of Timothy hay, and that wasn't its first introductory full meal of the day before you fed it its pellets or anything. That's another thing that you kind of want to do. Something that people seem to overlook a little bit is when you want to give your rabbits these sugary treats, and you can give apple and, well, let's just aside from the seeds are poisonous, and pear and banana and carrot and a strawberry and whatever. Try and do it after your rabbit has its morning or evening meal, dinner or breakfast, okay? So that that there's a fair amount of fiber and so on in the stomach that's then in turn going to end up inside of the fermentation chamber, so that at least it's not a big hit. You don't want, like that example you gave me there. Imagine, 15 grams of fruit sugars from that half of a banana in a 10-pound rabbit. You put that to scale to you or I. I'm 220 pounds. Now that 15 grams just became 300 grams. Yeah. Okay. So if I eat 300 grams of sugar, okay, and I don't even have a fermentation chamber, I'm gonna know the effects. Yes. And I wouldn't be doing it every day. I'd be a diabetic in a decade without a doubt. I'd be type 2. Okay. And again, that's where the cumulative thing comes in. So the bad advice that people are giving or getting on Facebook is, more times than not, innocent. It's just a misunderstanding. They haven't done anything. It was well intended. There was no wrongdoing. It was just, you kind of have to think, okay, but what if this rabbit doesn't handle it? What if it's a different breed? What if it doesn't get as much exercise as my rabbit? The rabbit that ate that half a banana, it might be in an outside run every day that's 40 feet by 40 feet and running all day.
That's all exercise,
And then another person gives a rabbit 20% the size, 20% that amount of banana, and the rabbit then immediately goes and spends 9 hours locked up in its hutch overnight while its owners are sleeping. That's not good.
That's not good at all.
So there's a time and a place and an amount, and everything has to be put to scale. And you really don't want to take these. You can, but you really don't want to take these chances with starchy, sugary foods and gassy foods every day.
And this whole conversation right now just really rectifies that a rabbit is not a first-time pet for a child. A rabbit is not a first-time pet. It's not, it's $20 or whatever.
Yeah.
It's too complex. I mean, I'm still struggling, to this day, but I'm learning every day. But it's so complex. I think that people just don't know. That's the thing. They just don't know.
And the one thing that always troubles me, guys, is when people say, I got a rabbit or to teach my child responsibility. You're the parent. It's your job to teach your responsibility. It's your job to teach them. If you've got a 5-year-old and you want them to teach them responsibility, you don't have a newborn and say, take care of that, take care of the baby, because you'll learn the responsibility. I mean, that's outrageous. And again, because they're prey animal, they're different. People think like dogs and cats. No, you were saying how they hide illnesses and that. That's because they are prey animal. That's what they're. They don't want to show that weakness, or they'll hide or stay under a chair or something.
Yeah, until it's very late. Until it's very late, exactly.
Or too late.
And again, this is why the advice that is given on whatever social media platform or whatever, that the person giving the advice is telling you the truth. They're telling you, my rabbit's 5 years old and it's been fine.
About their rabbit.
However, your rabbit for, I hate to say it, but your rabbit for the last 5 years that you've been giving it, 3 baby carrots every morning and 3 baby carrots every night and a banana, a piece of banana for every time you do tricks every day. Yeah. What you might not realize is your rabbit might not be very comfortable in his GI tract. No different than you or I going to work or going to an event with acid reflux or heartburn or a mild case of diarrhea. Nobody's going to know, but a rabbit is going to hide that it's a life-saving instinct. Okay, you can't show weakness in the wild, or a predator is going to pluck you up. It's going to follow you. It's going to get you. Okay, so you can say, but my rabbit's fine. I've been doing this for 5 years. Well, have you discussed that with your rabbit? No, you haven't. Your rabbit's not talking. So it might be sitting there every day with discomfort. Discomfort. Just discomfort. Let's not even call it pain. Let's call it discomfort. No, like I said, no different than you or I having acid reflux or heartburn. You're still going to go to work. If I had heartburn right now, you wouldn't know any better. Okay? Yeah. And my life doesn't depend on you not knowing like a rabbit's does. Right? Yeah. No, and rabbits don't get heartburn, but I'm using that as an example.
That's a good point. We were talking about the Facebook groups and the information, and hopefully it's all well intended. I remember we had rabbits on the pre-internet time when you had to go to the library, like you say, or consult with a vet or that works with exotics.
Write letters.
So this is, and the internet's great, but it's also filled with a lot of junk. I probably mentioned this to you before, Jonathan, but let me share this with you, Doug. I'll never forget talking to a vet in the community about something about head tilt, and I don't want to belabor it and get it long, but it was something that I learned that they were doing in England, and I suggested, what would you think of this? He's got a mug, a coffee mug, and he came out. I've got a great picture of him with this. It says, "Don't confuse your Google search with my veterinary medicine degree." And that's, again, you're getting search. There's a lot of bad information for humans, for animals, etc. And it may be well intended. Hopefully it's well intended.
More times than not, it is. More time, definitely. I would say the vast majority of times it is. It is well intended, and it's it's one rabbit owner giving advice to another. Absolutely, and I respect that. And they're technically And I'll say 99% of the time, they haven't done anything wrong. They're going based on their observations and their experiences. But again, kind of hiding in the closet is back to the point was, well, how comfortable was your rabbit during those periods? Was it sitting there kind of, my stomach hurts a little bit. It's not going to stop me moving. It's not going to stop me playing with you, but I'd feel a little bit better if I didn't have this extra gas and this abundance of bacteria in my cecum right now,
Yeah.
So that's kind of the, hiding in the closet thing that you'll never know. I'll never know. We'll never know until stasis or whatever, until it's critical.
Critical or too late in some cases.
Yeah, and it can be too late if you can't get to that in time and stuff like that. Absolutely, or one's not available or whatever.
Yeah.
Or like you said, go ahead.
A few months back, they waited a whole year. They were fine, and then all of a sudden it was like clock, just boom, one after the other. I mean, they're fine now, but it just was instant. They were fine, and then boom, it's like, whoa, what's going on? And I had to rush them down to the vet.
Yeah. It happens a lot.
Yeah, and that's it, but you've got to be aware. You've got to look for the signs, but better you prevent it.
You have to know your rabbit. I saw the facial expression, like that's not right.
That you saw. Say it again, Jonathan.
The facial expression.
Yeah.
I saw it. And I'm like, something's off. They didn't want treats. They didn't want anything. They sat there. They hid. I'm like, that's not right.
That's it. Yeah. Once the behavior changes to that, and usually they'll press their stomach against the ground because of the pressure of the gas. They'll sit in a slightly different, not so much of a loafed position. And you'll notice sometimes when they'll sit down, they'll kind of extend and press. Because they have that discomfort and they're trying to do whatever they can to ease that discomfort, right? As the impact kind of the GI stasis progresses into what can be fatal, right?
Yeah. So I got a question. So if a brand new bunny owner approached you, what would be the steps you would take to guide them to the proper education on, number one, the diet, and not only that, but not diving into a Facebook group or social platform and following the trends that are good, but might hurt their rabbit down the road? What education would you give someone off the bat, like myself?
Okay, well, it would depend if it's an adult rabbit. So let's base it on an adult rabbit because, junior rabbits have very different dietary needs as well. Like you have to wait until they're X amount of months before you even want to start introducing vegetables, for example, okay, and fruits and so on and so forth. And you're dealing with alfalfa hay for baby rabbits, which is actually a legume. It's not even a grass or a straw. It's loaded with protein and calcium and good stuff to make them grow and strengthen bones and stuff. But as an adult rabbit, let's say a rabbit, like the age of your rabbit's over a year old, I would say keep with staples and rotation. So safe staples, like I mentioned before, romaine lettuce and green leaf lettuce and red leaf lettuce, and there's a few more. And then for your variety factor, a couple of days a week, you can get into some other healthy, but, and when I say in moderation, some of them you can actually go a little bit more than like a couple of times a week. But we get into some more complicated things like people that want to feed spinaches and certain parsleys and dandelions. And then you get into, excessive beta carotenes, and then you get into orange urine and stuff like that. And you get into excessive nutrients. So you pick a couple of supplemental rotation vegetables per week on top of your 2 types of lettuce. You could have like my thing, like I just explained to you before, if the parsley doesn't look good, then I'll substitute it with dandelion greens and I'll get them a couple of days a week or whatever, a small amount. And that's kind of the rotation. But the hay is absolutely critical. The let's call it 80 or 85% of the total ingested diet being a high fiber, good hay, not like a yellow straw like they use. Like people got to kind of avoid that stuff. It's a get what you pay for world. So you kind of want to buy a reputable name brand hay or get it from a local farmer that, is growing a good product. But the hay is fundamental. And when you see your rabbit reducing hay intake, then you have to realize, well, maybe I'm giving too much vegetable. Maybe I'm giving too many pellets. How can I get my rabbit to ingest more hay? Maybe you want to try a different brand of hay. Maybe you want to switch from Timothy hay to like companies that sell mixes of, Timothy and orchard grass, for example, which is a softer, sweeter hay, less fiber and so on. But it's kind of like whatever it takes. You have to make sure that rabbit's ingesting. And oddly enough, the recommended daily amount of, they need unlimited hay at all ages, regardless of the age. Okay. But as just kind of like as a basis point, a starting point, the size of your rabbit is basically the size of the pile of hay you want to provide per day, whether it eats 70 or 80, 90%. Okay. So, you've got a 3-pound rabbit this big, you're going to want to put 2 big handfuls in the morning and 2 big handfuls in the evening type of thing. You want to go a little more than what they recommend, basically, too. You might have to waste a little bit. You might have to put it on top of the litter or whatever, and they'll nibble on it there, which is a big help, too, by the way. Have it accessible from the litter box, because rabbits want to eat hay while they're excrementing, okay, while they're doing their business, because if we go back to that, in with the new, out with the old. So while they're chewing, it's actually, you've got the saliva glands and everything else going on. You're moving, you're pushing, and you're putting material through. So they're eating, it's coming out as well. Processed. Go. Processed 5 different ways.
What does pellets fit into this diet? How often would you do that? Let's say my rabbits twice.
Pellets, okay. Pellets aren't an entirely necessary part of a rabbit's diet. They actually started as kind of, I hate to use the word convenience food, but they are. But there are some benefits to pellets, okay? Now, a rabbit can get all of its nutritional needs from this variety. And again, this is, now that you brought this up, we'll go back to the variety, why I told you why I switched between lettuces and herbs. And because you're getting different percentages of vitamin A and vitamin D and beta carotene, which is like huge in carrots and so on. So this is the healthy rotation that will give all of the necessary vitamins, minerals, and so on. So what pellets do is, and I use pellets, okay, 3-pound rabbit, give you an example, he gets 1 1/4 tablespoons in the morning and 1 to 1.5 tablespoons in the evening, okay? Why do I give pellets? Well, I use a really, really high fiber content pellet. When you're looking for a pellet for an adult rabbit, keep in mind, we're talking about adult rabbits right here. Very, very different with junior rabbits. You want to aim for around, they'll always give a minimum maximum, but let's say 25% crude fiber is a decent reputable pellet. You'll get top price high-end pellets that go into the low 30%. So by doing that, you're kind of providing, it's almost like a daily vitamin, as well as it's made out of hay, okay? Pellets are compressed, the junior ones will be alfalfa and or Timothy mix, and the adult formula rabbit foods with Timothy. So you're basically giving a compressed hay, okay, that has supplemental nutrients and vitamins that are very beneficial, okay? They are beneficial. So there are a lot of good things to be said about pellets, but you have to be careful of the amount you give. If I were to suddenly start giving my rabbit, instead of, let's say, 2.5 tablespoons a day, tomorrow I started giving him 5, he's going to love it. But what's going to happen? We're going to be filling up that abdomen. We're going to be filling up that cecum with this material. We're going to be reducing the hay. Now, hay is a roughage. So when I say roughage, all these pipes and tracks and gut 1, gut 2 that I described before, basically the hay, the hard fibrous hay, is like a scrubbing agent. So as it's passing through the pipes and the tubes and the valleys and the twists and the turns, it's grabbing loose hair that your rabbit ingested. It's pulling this material with it, okay? So it's a scrubbing agent, all right? It's a roughage, like when we eat salads. Okay, it's very, very similar, but it's a lot more aggressive. It's literally like a brush, okay, passing through the GI tract from beginning to end. So absolutely, I wouldn't say that pellets aren't necessary 100%, but you can go without. If your rabbit's eating in abundance, now you're going to move your hay percentage up from 80-85% to 85-90% because you removed the fiber and the nutrients and stuff from the pellets that you were previously giving or decided not to give any at all. So now you've got to kind of balance that, make that balance happen again with an even more kind of a more thorough rotation. So maybe now you want to have, 3 or 4 or even 5 different, kind of want to buy vegetables that you're going to eat yourself, because at the end of the day, especially if you have a small rabbit like myself, if I were to buy, a curly parsley, a green leaf lettuce, a romaine lettuce, a bunch of dandelions, and so on and so forth, it's too much for my rabbit before it'll expire, before it'll go bad in the fridge, basically. So get things that you like as well, and then you can increase the rotation. You can, one day a week, you could give your rabbit X, said vegetable because you bought it for your salad, cut celery into very, very tiny, skinny pieces because of the fibers. That's another story altogether.
Well, speaking of lettuce, what about the iceberg lettuce? Because I see people feeding iceberg lettuce to rabbits, and I always cringe.
Yeah, as do I. You know what? Yeah, I've dealt with quite a few GI stasis cases for just this, where it was the rabbit was, basically iceberg lettuce strictly in a few of them. So iceberg lettuce is 95% water. Okay, that's number one. Number two is the remaining 5% is very, very weak nutritional value, very, very weak. And basically what it is it's like a filler food. It would be like, an athlete eating popcorn. Okay. And then going and running 100-yard dash the next morning. So, but the real complications, there's a couple of things that kind of come into play with iceberg. Number one is there's a chemical compound that in abundance in there, lactocatarium, and in abundance that is actually a mild sedative, okay, and which will make your rabbit, if you were to feed iceberg lettuce every day in large amounts, which will make your rabbit very, very lethargic, which is bad. Now they're not exercising, and exercise causes stimulation of the GI tract from the contraction of the muscles, the hind muscles. So movement causes movement in the GI tract. Just walking, even when your rabbit's walking, it assists. So you have that, you have the water, you have the lack of nutrients, and the other problem is this high concentration of water. When it enters that fermentation chamber that I described before, it throws the balance so far out of whack, it's terrible, okay? That's
right, yeah, exactly. It throws it off.
So now we're back at that whole fermentation chamber, the flora, the gut flora, the balance. So now when the bacteria and the fungal yeast and everything attack this cecum filled with iceberg lettuce,
more water.
It's all water. Okay, so now you've put your balances out. You're really gaining no nutrition, and of course it leads to other problems too. Again, diarrhea and so on and so forth. Okay, so you really want to avoid iceberg lettuce entirely. I can tell you on the internet that I would say 80 or 90%, it could be more, of the sources that and there's all the big ones, I won't name them, but everybody knows the big rabbit, and I'll name a few: Humane Society, SPCA. You go to any of their websites and they will very, very strongly warn you against feeding any iceberg lettuce at all.
Good.
Why take the chance?
Yeah, why take the chance?
And then you'll read, a couple of leaves a day are fine. Well, is your rabbit 10 pounds or 2.5 pounds? So that advice doesn't hold true to everybody. And then again, when they say a couple of leaves a day is fine, now we go back to our previous discussion where variety and cumulative issues. So now you're going to have a cecum in a rabbit that's getting, let's say, 20% of its daily lettuce intake. You got 80% romaine or green leaf, and every day you give 1 or 2 leaves to a 5-pound rabbit of iceberg lettuce. It is going to make the cecum and the yeast and the bacterial compounds that cause the fermentation to kind of be retuned to deal with high volumes of water. It'll take days or weeks. And then once it gets to that point, as soon as you eliminate that thing, you have to go back and balance again. So in my honest opinion, just avoid it completely. It's just not worth it. If your rabbit had absolutely nothing to eat, the stores were closed, it's Friday of a long weekend or whatever, you're in the middle of nowhere, you realize you forgot your romaine lettuce at home, your rabbit's hungry, your neighbor says, well, I've got iceberg lettuce for the hamburgers. Give it a half a leaf or a leaf. Yeah. Okay, fine. But do that after it has eaten some hay. Okay? So, and again, we go back to where you kind of want sort of like a catalyst, kind of like a tinder of sorts, okay? Like kindling wood, sorry. So again, I would avoid it, but it's not going to kill your rabbit, okay? It's not going to kill your rabbit. The occasional time, absolutely not, but don't do it every day. Just don't.
Doug Elkins, what about home remedies? Talk with us a little bit about the good, the bad.
There's definitely a place in isolated areas and, emergency situations. I've encountered many people online and stuff like that are, again, 3-hour drive. So home remedies for GI stasis specifically, I would say the number one that comes up, and actually very controversial, I can tell you it has most certainly, I would say, saved lives is simethicone emulsion, which you find in baby gas drops. Okay. So now when we go back to the discussion about the expansion caused by the excessive gas in the cecum and the discomfort that causes, and then causes the rabbit to feel that it's full, it won't eat, it won't drink, by administering, say, on a 5-pound rabbit, typically I believe people use like 1 or 1.5 milliliters or cc's, and I think that's about 20 drops. And they will administer these simethicone baby gas drops or colic drops to their rabbit, and that will actually dissipate the gas. So that can be a life-saving thing. So if it's life and death, there's absolutely, and again, very controversial. Everybody has their own opinions. I'm not going to endorse it. I'm not going to endorse it. What would I do? If I couldn't get a hold of a vet, they were closed, and I knew my rabbit clearly had bloat, I do have right now simethicone emulsion drops. Never opened, thank God.
Fortunately, yeah.
But they're there for that emergency where there's absolutely nobody available and it's life or death. Definitely a place for that. Some of the other home remedies, the ones that understandable, but they kind of have concerning side effects. Pineapple juice. Let's start with pineapple juice.
Please.
Yeah. So pineapple. There's 2 enzymes that are very useful for breaking down wool in a rabbit's digestive tract. Instead of saying GI, let's just say digestive. There's 2 enzymes in papaya. Don't quote me. I believe it's called papain. Okay. And in pineapple, it is bromelain. Okay. Now, these and the bromelain in pineapple is actually most concentrated in the core, not in the actual fruit. The part that everybody throws away, well, I won't say everybody, but the cord section, the least desirable part, has the highest amounts of bromelain.
Okay.
The papaya papain and the bromelain in pineapple and pineapple juice has some of it, but not a lot. Absolutely 100% will assist with breaking down a wool block, okay, or a semi-obstruction, not a full-blown obstruction. When you want to administer that, realistically, you've got to be careful because you don't want to give it when there's a full obstruction. The problem I have with this, and it has worked for many people, so kudos to them, I get it. It's got a ton of sugar. So now here you have a rabbit that's in a stasis or has a cecal impaction, a GI stasis scenario. And let's assume that it is safe for it to drink, 5 or 10 milliliters. It will go through the gut and make its way because there's no blockage, no wool block or anything. Let's assume everything's good. Well, guess what? You've broken down, or you've assisted in breaking down the wool block, assuming that was the problem. And you really don't know without an x-ray or a proper exotic veterinarian exam. Now you've deliberately introduced a massive single shot volume of sugar to an already immobile cecum. So it's basically like, when in the old days we had charcoal briquette barbecues and you'd light it up and it'd be like, oh, look, they're not all gray on the edges. Grab the squeeze bottle, whoosh.
Yes.
With the barbecue starter fluid. That's kind of sort of what you're doing with the pineapple juice. But again, it has worked for people. But you're kind of fighting a fire with gas, okay, in a sense, but it could be a life-saving thing. But would I do it personally? Highly unlikely. I would aim more towards, you can actually buy the supplements. There's a few, and I actually have them here because I do give them during molting season. You can buy papaya supplements. And again, they're a little bit controversial, but they've proven to work very well for me. And they contain the papain and the bromelain in a very small, treat. My rabbit likes them. And when my rabbit's molting, I'll give him one every night before bed because that's when he's least active. Okay.
Yeah.
After he eats his hay. And that kind of keeps everything going. So, there's always kind of a better, safer way than the home remedies, but there is definitely a place for them in emergency situations. They definitely can save lives, but you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah, you have to know what you're doing.
All the conditions have to be perfect, right?
Yeah, that's obviously very, very knowledgeable, Doug Elkins. But let's talk, Jonathan, do you want to talk a little bit about Bunny Chat?
Well, yeah, we actually designed Bunny Chat for not veterinarian advice or medical advice. It's more of just a outlet to where we can give information like Doug's giving right now. So, Doug, why don't you go ahead and explain your experience with the Bunny Chat so far and helping people and the questions you are getting. How does that determine Are these people looking at the Facebook groups? Where are they getting their information? Can you decipher the whole thing with the bunny chat by talking to them?
And forgive me a second, at
Yes.
rabbitsavior.com. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So there's kind of a mix here. Oddly enough, a recent occurrence, and this one's, and I hate to even say it because the veterinarians are fabulous people who love them. There's two types of veterinarians. There's kind of what I consider like a highly educated general practitioner veterinarian, dogs, cats, and so on. And then, of course, we have the exotics veterinarians. And these people are absolutely, without a doubt, the way to go if you have a rabbit issue. If you don't have an exotic veterinarian planned or saved in your phone that is 24-hour service, locate one now before it's too late. And start visiting them for your regular checkups and if you decide to go for nail clippings or whatever, okay? So there was a situation on the bunny chat recently where somebody, and again, was feeding iceberg lettuce. And oddly enough, apparently this was the advice of a veterinarian that was not an exotics veterinarian, not a rabbit savvy veterinarian. And that advice was given to this member's previous rabbit. This was going back 3 or 4 years ago. And that advice included don't feed pellets. Iceberg lettuce is safe. So, and apparently it worked for that rabbit. I'm assuming, I'm going to guess it really didn't work that well from my experiences, but now this member's new rabbit, just over a month ago, ran into full blown emergency stasis, like ER, the whole 9 yards, like race.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago, same person, and I had never dealt with this person before. On the chat, same person gets on. This was 7:30 in the morning here in Toronto. I'm here in Montreal. My rabbit hasn't eaten or poods, and of course, then I ask all the questions: when, this, that. What have you seen? When's the last time it drank? This and that. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? Is it hiding? All the signs screamed GI stasis is here. And then I'm informed that 4 weeks ago, this just happened, and I think it's the same thing again. I think I'm back in this GI stasis thing. Okay, fine. So the rush starts, member packs up, drives 30 minutes to an exotic vet, can't accept her, too busy. Recommended another one. Get back in the car with this ill rabbit it's in so much pain that it's shivering, okay? It's shaking in pain, which is critical, and teeth grinding in the whole 9 yards, like severe pain, okay? So back in the car and moving again, and luckily this exotics did get in. So the rabbit ended up spending the night. Jonathan would know better, but I remember the initial estimate for this, and a full member in our Tier 1 program and everything. This member's initial estimate was $800 to $1,200. This was, an hour after arriving at the second exotic veterinarians. Now we're looking at like 9:30 a.m. So now the rabbit's been in this condition for going on 2 hours. Yeah. Rabbit ended up spending the night. Following day, touched base through the chat and said, any updates? Did it end up sending the night? Yeah. Be picking the rabbit up later on today. Great. And I said, okay, do you mind if I ask what you feed your rabbit? And then it started. Iceberg lettuce every day. Okay. Big red flag. Any other, no other lettuce. Why? Because that's what the vet told me. Which vet? And I'm thinking, this can't be the vet you're at right now. And no. My previous rabbit 3 years ago. Okay. What type of pellets? Don't feed pellets. Okay. I can kind of understand. So you must have a really balanced diet going on. Like this vet, no idea where this iceberg lettuce thing came from, but this vet that told you to discontinue pellets. So you have a really great rotation going on to keep all the vitamins and so on and so forth. No, I feed this and I feed this and I feed. And there was a couple of other red flags. There was, gassy kale, which is high in sulfurous, kale, a little bit of kale, sometimes every day, sometimes every second day. And I said, a little bit once in a while. A little bit's
good, but not full blown.
Yeah.
Yeah, and personally, I there's some things that just out of being overly cautious that I just avoid completely, and that is all of the brassica group vegetables. Okay, that being cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, and so on. It's just personal. Other people want to do it. I get it. For me, why take the chance? There's dozens of safe vegetables and herbs.
Yeah, why risk
it? I mean, I can eat deep fried chicken every day too, and a 300-gram chocolate bar, but I'm not going to do it. Why?
Yeah.
Because
it's not good for you.
Cumulatively, it's not good for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why we designed Learning Chat. So just so we can get people to go to a platform, almost like a concierge service. So if I'm scrambling, I don't know where that is, Doug or Jennifer Lee can take care of, okay, where's your location? Okay, here, go there. So we try to give information out to get to the vet first, not home remedies, a place where you can go talk to someone like Doug or Jennifer Lee or Julia and get information to lead you somewhere that's going to help you. So I know a lot of people are giving, medical advice over, like a virtual hotline or things they're doing.
Yeah, I know.
That stuff scares me a little bit. Not saying it's bad, but just, the
only thing that in my opinion, I mean, there's a few things that can talk you through when you and I've seen these online services. I mean, some of them are $65 and so on and so forth, and it's basically phone a vet. Okay. Yeah. Now, the only thing that a vet can really determine that would hint to the fact that there's a GI stasis or an impact event going on in the digestive tract is temperature. The rabbit's temperature will go down. I mean, a rabbit's temperature should be 101 to 103. If you're lucky enough that the person has one of the laser temperature guns, which became so common during COVID for entering into facilities and so on. So now you see them everywhere. Short of that, I mean, there's other ways to get a rabbit's temperature, but they're not very enjoyable for the rabbit.
No.
But, aside from that, over a phone or over a Zoom call, a vet really needs to, and it's very, very delicate procedure, really needs to either feel. Yeah. And another thing is determining why the GI stasis happened. It might not be all diet. It could be the rabbit just slowed down eating. So a lot of times where the vet will start is checking the teeth, because when a rabbit has a dental issue, it eats less. Okay. And when it eats less, then you get slowing of the GI. And then when the pain gets so bad or the teeth have overgrown to the point that they're making contact with the upper rear so on and so forth with the upper teeth, they can't even chew. Okay. Yeah. So they stop eating. So the GI stasis might have absolutely nothing to do with a bad diet or bad diet practices or an excessive sugar or starch or carbs. Stress. It could be dental. It could be stress. You could have moved from one home to another and the rabbit doesn't eat for 12 or 14 hours because it's hiding under the couch in your new house, thumping its feet every 30 seconds, scared to death. Yeah. So it doesn't eat. It could be that. It could be pain from a broken nail. It could be a lot of things could start this thing in motion, right? Yeah. So all of these things over the phone or over a Zoom call, I mean, and of course you have if it's a severe case, you have no radiology. You go to an exotic veterinarian's and the rabbit's full blown GI stasis. It's going to do a little feel to see if it can feel it's bloated, it's gassy. Then it's time for radiology x-rays to identify if there's a blockage, wool blockage. They can physically see the expansion of the cecum caused by the excessive fermentation gases and so on and so forth. You can't do that over a 1440 webcam. Yeah.
And when I would urge people to know if you have a 24-hour emergency service. I know we in Metropolitan have gone to numerous times, and they're wonderful. They've got a lot of experienced people, 24 hours a day. Yes, it's, I hate to say expensive. The cost is higher than going to a vet during normal business hours. Yet when you need it, and that's the other aspect. You've got to be financially set if you're going to adopt a rabbit.
Yeah, or have room on your credit cards, and there's also financing programs and stuff that a lot of veterinarians offices offer too. They'll give you like a post-dated, back in the old days, post-dated check, but basically a payment plan.
Yeah, in the old days,
they're not going to turn you away and say you don't have $900, so beat it. You owe us $150 for the appointment. You don't have the other $750. You can leave. No, they're 99.99% of the time you're not going to experience that. The vet's going to say, okay, so. All right, look, we're going to help you here, but let's come up with a plan. Can you give us $200, a month, $100 a month? Do you want us to put $100 on this credit card, $100 on that credit card, and the balance? Get your mother-in-law to call us. We'll put it on her Visa. They'll work with you. They will, because their best interest really is that's why they chose the profession is the well-being of animals, and they're not going to outright turn you away. They're going to help, right?
Yeah. And they work with you. I know that.
They do.
Yeah. I know that. And again, if you know in your area that there is a 24-hour vet, it was comforting when we've had to go. I knew Metropolitan was there. I knew they were very qualified, experienced, et cetera, with exotics, et cetera. And you go. And when in doubt, you get in the car and go.
Yeah.
That's the hardest problem because it's like some places or certain areas don't have exotic vets in the vicinity. So you can drive myself an hour this way or an hour that way. So it's hard. But, one of the biggest things we're working on right now is a directory on our website to where it'll be updated every 30 days. We don't endorse the vets by all means, but we're going to have a directory of here is a 24-hour emergency, here's a shelter, here's this, here's that. It'll be updated. No reviews, but if you need something, you can look at our directory and it's there for you. Instead of
That's
Googling
great, Jonathan.
Yeah, try to figure out something. So, or you can sign up for the Bunny Chat, talk to Doug, Julia, or Jen, and we can assist you on trying to find a location that's 24-hour or things like that. So.
Yeah, and that's so important, again, to be able, Jonathan, to Rabbit Savior, to have those resources for people.
Yeah.
So they can go and they know this is a good source. They can go and get the information, like you were saying with Bunny Chat. Right, Doug?
Yep, absolutely.
Obviously, you are incredibly experienced and knowledgeable. I'm blown away by the...
I know.
Yeah, right,
I was just
Jonathan?
like, wow, Doug.
Well, like I said, at the end of the day, if I had to try and take in all this information now, I mean, let's say I'm 50-ish, okay, for argument's sake. But I got into this at a very young age, and I also think that when you read from veterinary science, medical journals, and so on and so forth, when you're 10, 12, 15, 16 years old, you absorb it. In my opinion, I absorbed it a lot better. You're kind of at the learning age in your life. I mean, I was going to high school at that point, junior school. And, I read and I researched, and between then and now, the internet, I mean, as soon as the internet came out, everything that I knew, I just verified. And that was it, done. That's it. I mean, and anybody can do it. Anybody can do it. I mean, I could sit down with either one of you guys with a pot of coffee and spend, 60 or 90 minutes with you and draw a diagram on a piece of paper with a big pen and then say, okay, now you describe it to me, and boom, you're there. I mean, it's really not rocket science. It isn't. It's just understanding the fundamentals. And it's a lot of, it's biology. There's biology, and the fermentation chamber thing kind of comes down into that. That's a little bit of chemistry. So you got a little bit of biology, a little bit of chemistry, a little bit of a rabbit twist in the whole thing. And but at the end of the day, you've got five or six things that are happening in this GI tract, and you just kind of have to break them down. Is this does this does that, this does this, and this, and then once you realize that, it's like any one thing goes wrong, you got a problem. You're the beginning of a problem.
Doug, I've got to say, 50-ish. I was a kid when I was 50-ish. So where do you get my age?
You're only as old as you feel, bro, right?
Well, I have to say there are realities with I'm in my 69th year. There are realities.
Yeah.
But you've got to do things.
I'll be 50 in 7 years.
I'm sorry?
I'll be 50 in 7 years.
Yeah.
Getting old.
Yeah. I remember when I was 43. Those were the days, Archie Bunker. Those were the days. Yeah.
Yes, those were the days, even in the 50s. But again, you're so knowledgeable, and with all your experience and how you explain things, Doug Elkins is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. So educational. Awesome. So educational. Yes. And Jonathan, one more time, if you don't mind, about Rabbit Savior and what's going on.
Oh, you know what? We got to go. Yeah. I think right now we're at a point to, I guess, our favorite thing right now is to help people as much as possible. So I'm at the point where I love responding to people in the DMs and messages and trying to help as much as I can. And it's just evolved into just this whole hub thing that I've always been, wanting. And it's just so beautiful to see just growing and growing and growing and growing. But right now, we're still growing. We're working on everything. We're revamping some things here and there, tweaking some things. Just really trying to get something out there for everybody to use and everybody to trust. And trusted source. Trust is the biggest thing. And just have fun with this, and just really try to change the narrative with everything. Because right now we're going to do Fun, which is Bunnies Unite Now. It'll be our own signature platform for legal changes, legislation changes down the road. So we're going to launch that in about 6 months. So there's a lot of stuff in the works. So it's keep growing, keep going.
And you're driven to do it. And I would urge people to go to rabbitsavior.com and read your story. I was just blown away when I first learned. And again, it's kind of like, and I think
I dove into the rabbit community head first without my arms open. Just
say it again.
I said I dove into this community head first.
Yeah. And you're doing an amazing job. But again, the story, it's kind of like that, who rescued whom, right? That's very, very, very
100%.
common that we hear. Doug Elkins, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you guys.
Not just for doing the gig with us today, but for
I learned a lot.
Yeah, I've learned a lot.
Yeah,
I've learned a lot, and I've had rabbits for decades.
Yeah,
I've learned a lot. And some of it's good when you can understand the process.
The process.
It's one thing to know, well, I'm looking for this. It must be that. To understand the process, Doug Elkins, that you explain, I think is invaluable for people.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that. My pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you,
so much,
guys. Thank you. Thank you so much.